This is the first in a series of webinars that the BCO Scottish Committee have organised, which is themed turbocharged trends. I think we all are suffering a wee bit from COVID fatigue, and we also recognise that there's been some real changes that we've all had to face, and some of these are actually very positive for our organisations. So today's session is essentially about necessity being the mother of invention, and how new tech developments are allowing us, hopefully, to get back to work safely, and understanding the thinking beyond the return. So I'm joined here today by a couple of speakers, and we're essentially going to have a kind of conversation with them this afternoon. It would be great if anybody has any questions to actually just fire them through in the little question box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll address them as we go. But I'm joined this afternoon with Douglas Morrison. Douglas is an experienced leader, innovator and educationalist with a background in construction and innovation. He recently joined the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre as Director of Operations and Future Skills, and he is responsible for supporting the construction industry to accelerate the transition towards net zero practices and inclusive growth. Douglas is a passionate advocate of empathetic innovation. I'm going to ask him about that later. And he's a fellow of the Institute of Innovation and Knowledge Exchange. Do you want to say hi, Douglas?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
I'm also joined by Peter Kerr. Now, Peter's an electrical engineer, and I have worked with Peter for a long time now. So he's got over 25 years of experience and he's currently a director with Atelier 10, and he's based in the Glasgow office. Peter has a reputation for pushing the boundaries in his field and has many interests across loads of subjects, from cooking to electrical engineer to structures, all sorts. But particularly has pushed the use of things like circadian lighting, focusing on health and wellness in the workplace, and assessing the all-electric future. And over the last few years, it's the integration and implementation of smart building technologies. And I know Peter has pushed this with a lot of his clients. Do you want to say hi, Peter?
Hi.
That was very short and sweet. Okay, so I've got a series of questions here, and my first one, I suppose, and I'll go to Douglas and then Peter in that order. What are the key challenges being faced by the industry that you see at the moment?
Okay, thanks, Gillian, and thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to come along and have this conversation. I mean, I suppose the obvious massive challenge is very much around how we respond to COVID and post-COVID environments. The First Minister's announcement yesterday took the construction industry into phase 3 of a phase 6 plan, and what that really means is that, you know, a lot of the planning that we've been putting in place over the last few months is now kicking in, and we're starting to see the fruits of our labour. I guess to really summarise where the key challenges lie beyond the obvious of, you know, getting people back in and maintaining cash flow. I think the big key challenge that the industry is facing is how we maintain health, safety, and well-being of those that are in our care, and I think that's obviously, you know, a continuously moving challenge. It's a challenge which, you know, it's fair to say we have more questions than answers at this stage, but very much goes hand in hand with the second kind of, you know, macro level challenge, which will certainly be of interest to participants today around maximising occupancy. And in turn boosting productivity, because these two things don't necessarily go in hand. And I think we do have big questions around what blended models of working look like at scale. So we've done it for a few months. How do we scale that up? What does it look like? You know, what aspects can we keep going, and which aspects do we need to cut off? I think the third point that I'd like to make is very much for me the largest challenge, which is around stimulating the significant behavioural and cultural changes that are going to be required as we start to reoccupy the buildings in which we work. We are asking people to let go of the traits that make us human. You know, we're talking about forming social bonds and relationships, and I guess what the point there is to, try and be compassionate, empathetic, and connected from from a 2 metre distance. So as you would expect me to say, there's a big education and skills piece here. Again, I appreciate this is about technology and technologies it can underpin. So I would like to point to a number of organisations that are using 3D reality capture with walkthroughs and scenario-based overlays to train staff in advance of returning to work. I think it's a really positive development to trying to stimulate that behavioural change whilst minimising the fear and trepidation of returning into these hazardous environments.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Thanks very much. Peter, what are your views?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've been seeing is the confidence levels is the most important element. Making people happy, if you like, to go back to work is probably one of the biggest issues, and it's probably down to us as designers to try and help, if you like, inform that kind of trajectory back into the workplace. And provide systems and mechanisms that make that environment feel safer. Because at the end of the day, it's about, first of all, it's about feeling safe and having that visibility of what is safe. The other thing is educating people, if you like, and staff. It's about what's needed for them to feel safe. And the other thing is to consider, there'll be some people that are really going to feel pretty, scared about coming back, even more so than people sometimes are going a wee bit, well, I'll go back, I'm okay, but there'll be some people going, I really don't want to go back and I don't feel safe. And in creating potentially environments and spaces that they can use. So I mean, one of the instances we're looking at, one of the projects is that potentially the creation of dedicated rooms and more cellularization in some of the spaces. So that the people that don't want to be facing like an open plan space, they can go into a separate room for the people who feel really, concerned about the situation. So I think there is quite a big change, getting back into the workplace, but also how the workplace will react in the longer term, and what kind of things, and we'll talk about technology hopefully in a second, but what kind of things can we do to make that place, I keep saying it, but making it feel safe and making it feel as if it's somewhere they want to go.
Yeah. I think I one of the clients that I was talking to was actually helping staff with explaining through diagrams and videos what they wanted to do, but actually offering visits to to help staff understand or feel and make the decision then about whether they wanted to come back or not, because they could work from home, but equally perhaps it was a part-time role initially, just while people kind of got into the swing of things. So I suppose it's about educating as best you can using the tools you've got available. Yes. So moving on to the role of innovation, I suppose from your perspective, Douglas, being innovative and having ideas and perhaps thinking beyond the obvious can play a big part in our response. So what's your take on the role of innovation?
Yeah, okay. So it's a really good question. I think one of the key challenges around innovation is just clearly defining what we mean by innovation. I think everyone has different interpretations. So for me, it's absolutely about generating new ideas. It's certainly more about applying and creating new value from the application of those ideas. I think my clear message that we're trying to give to the stakeholders that we're working with is that innovation is not necessarily about inventing new things. There's lots of products, solutions, services that are already on the market. And in fact, where we are seeing value being created is actually through the adoption of solutions that are designed for for adjacent markets or for similar sectors. So I think that kind of cross-disciplinary, cross-contamination of solution is really important. But we're also seeing that innovation in a large part is coming from the omission of existing ways of working. So we'll remove this step and we'll remove that step, and that creates a safer, healthier, happier working environment, for example. I think at this time more than ever, eternal optimism sits at the heart of our response, and You know, it's not about naive optimism. It's about recognising that there are, you know, there are best possible solutions. And you know, certainly from an innovation context, we feel a sense of responsibility to drive towards the optimal solution. Very much around connecting the dots. I guess a key, I suppose, warning is that, you know, it's our response here is not about looking at how we normally do things and then trying to apply tech on top of that to optimize it in some way. It's very much about challenging whether we're trying to do the wrong thing slightly better, whether there's an entirely new thing we should be doing. But what I would say, you really emphasize that overlaying tech on an existing way of working is rarely the best answer. A couple other points. We find at the Innovation Centre that one of the key challenges we have is in working with our partners to actually define their challenges. There's no shortage of solution providers, there's no shortage of problem solvers, very clear brief, and I'm sure both of you will expect the value of a clear and concise brief from your clients, but it goes a long way. And I think for those that are thinking about the adoption of technical solutions, I would warn against, you know, this almost pick and mix, this development of a Franken system with lots of different bits to it that don't quite work together and or quickly become redundant. And I guess that leads to my last point, which is around thinking very carefully about how we integrate technologies, and not just in the sense that we integrate them within a system, but we also have to integrate them you know, in the context of the way in which, you know, people think and live and work, and make sure again that empathetic piece, that the technologies that we're deploying are delivering on the aims and outputs in relation to, you know, health, safety and well-being, but are also adding some form of value to people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Peter, have you got anything more to add on the innovative side?
I mean, there'll be probably more stuff on the tech, but in terms of taking the concept of innovation, one of the things that this, if you like, crisis is created is a challenge. And one of the big things is that challenge drives innovation, you know. So from our perspective, we have been looking at, from a design perspective, is actually how to create more natural means of designing, if you like, buildings. Because again, one of the things that if we can design buildings that feel, again, I keep using the word safe, but safer in terms of the use of the spaces, cleaner, if you like, because everybody has this idea about the air conditioning system being something that recycles air. So we're kind of thinking about the innovations actually going back to basics and actually creating environments which are more connected to natural spaces. It's quite a different thought process. However, there are many buildings that are already, if you like, underway at the moment, and there are buildings that we have got in that are finished and we have to solve. But the innovation is actually at this point in time is looking forward. We're having to solve challenges that have been created by existing buildings, which, as you said, Douglas, it might be a bit of a Frankenstein moment in terms of technologies, but sometimes the only way, again, to get people back into the workplace is maybe to do that in a short term for the existing buildings. But looking forward is where we're considering, if you like, our innovation and our approach to buildings. But again, the cities have a big part to play in master plans and public realms and external spaces. They've got a massive part to play in this, in creating these safe environments, because these safe environments mean things like making sure our air's clean in the cities.
Yeah,
you know, is a major element. If we have got any chance of getting our buildings naturally ventilated, which is the best, if you like, option for, if you like, COVID, is actually having as much air and clean air as possible, not mixed. We need to, if you like, we need to lobby our politicians to clean up our cities, because our targets are too low. We keep talking about our clean air spaces, and we're creating clean air zones in the city centre when you can still get a 3 litre diesel, and that'll still be fine for the next 10 years. Doesn't make sense to me, but there you go. So again, the innovation there is thinking forward. We've got problems to solve now, But there's bigger things that we need to solve in Townscape to allow us to design buildings to deal with this kind of thing, which might be a cyclic thing, and it might be something that we see. We're seeing these moments. I mean, this isn't the first one that we've had, remember, it's just the first one that's really hit us hard. And the kind of some of the stuff that I've read is that potentially you could see more aggressive forms of this going forward. But remember, we are people who want to meet together. We need the face-to-face contact. We need spaces to congregate. We just need to make them feel comfortable, and that's where our thoughts are, if you like, going forward.
Yes, I think that's very interesting, and actually it prompts me to pull up one of the questions that somebody's asked already. Jill Pritchard has said, is the crucial question not what is the office for? If people are going back to sit in a room on their own, then what is the point? Surely the office is for social connection, collaboration and co-production, etc. And I have to say, I completely agree with that, Jill. We at Michael Laird have been putting our toe in the water a wee bit by having some collaborative sessions in the office, and we had one yesterday and the day before in Glasgow, and it was fantastic. I was hugely excited at seeing my team, and there was just a few of us went in, but one of the girls that came in actually said, I feel really unproductive because I've not produced all this stuff. Had I been at home, I would have. But actually, what was much more beneficial was the fact that we could all get together. And we have the luxury of having a fairly well spaced out office and fairly large breakout spaces, etc. So we were able to do it, and we did feel comfortable doing it. But I suppose it's recognizing that it's the human element and the connectivity, and the fact that we actually we're interacting, that it's that human element that we're really missing just now, and is really beneficial and helps us in our processes. So how do we get that balance? Is it a case of it's this creating confidence that it's going to be safe to go back, and it's safe to have these conversations, but perhaps having a mix of working at home as well? So have you got anything? Jill's just said, that's really interesting, Gillian. Thank you. No problem. But Peter, have you guys been in the office at all, or are you just completely?
We're pretty much everyone's working from home at the moment. We've given access, if you like, to the team for the team to go into the office with certain instructions about what to do. Our management team, we went in just to see how we can get back, and one of the things that they were doing is try to develop a strategy for getting back to the workplace. We've done things like surveys with the staff to get an idea of how they're feeling at the moment and what would make them feel comfortable to come back. But again, we were fortunate enough to set up everything so that we could work remotely. So we've got everything in place we can work remotely, but we know that we've had feedback from the staff. They're feeling, I mean, there's people in that want to come back in and have that collaboration, that the banter, if you like, of the office space is actually quite important in terms of people's mental well-being. And I think the idea of trying to bring along your younger staff and trying to develop them is a bit more challenging in this type of environment. You don't get literally the proper FaceTime, not the Apple FaceTime, but the proper FaceTime with staff to actually, sit down, get a feel for what's going on. And we don't have the physical barrier, if you like, this digital barrier, if you like, that's between us at the moment. And again, an office space to me is about bringing down those barriers. And that's the way that we should be considering these spaces going forward, is that there might not be a space that's there that you use 5 days a week, but it might be, there'll be spaces that are needed to allow us to meet, congregate and collaborate, develop ideas and train people. I mean, that's my view.
Yeah. Douglas, we've never met in person, but when we chatted last week, you said actually you're new to the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, so you've actually only experienced it virtually, up until this point. Is that right?
I have. I think I had four days in the office at the very beginning, and I mean, I suppose for me, there are real parallels, and there's a lot of learning to come from the journey that the education sector have been through, particularly in terms of trying to roll out both the face-to-face learning, but then the wholly online learning. And then what we see from online learning is that success rates generally are lower, student satisfaction rates are lower. The ability to develop long-term relationships is far more limited, and so I fully appreciate that when we define measures of success by things like productivity and outputs, there is a legitimate argument for maintaining this home remote working kind of environment, but I do think that it misses out again. Both of you have made the point. Those deeper, kind of more subtle metrics which underpin our physical and emotional well-being, and which drive long-term productivity, collaboration, and relationship building. So, whilst I'm certainly an advocate of the application of tech solutions, I'm absolutely an advocate of flexible home and remote working as a choice, rather than an imposition. I absolutely see the value. And have particularly looking at the team that I work with, can see firsthand the genuine desire to get back into the workplace.
Yeah. On the kind of learning from other sectors, I mean, I just in terms of what I do, it's really interesting and important for us to design across a number of different sectors. But looking beyond the workplace, you talked about learning from education. I was talking to actually a furniture manufacturer who actually in America they actually have a large healthcare manufacturing operation, and they are applying some of the learnings from the healthcare sector.
Mm-hmm.
And they had talked about understanding about the technology you need, the space, people and behaviours, but also about operations, whether that's cleaning or FM, and that I suppose starts from the journey to work to work from home. Yeah. So whether it's mask on public transport, whether it's within your building, if you only occupy a floor in a building, you can control and monitor and manage your space. But how do you get from the front door up to level 10 in a building, for instance? And it's making sure that all of these things are kind of tied together. So in addition to education, I think that's a really good point about actually how blended learning is important. You need a mix of online and face-to-face. Do you have any other views of other sectors that we could be looking to and learning from?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the obvious sector for me is the one that I'm closest to. So I think some of the changes that we're seeing in the construction industry right now, I think have taken us all by surprise. And I don't think we would have seen them had we not been experiencing this pandemic. The industry has historic low rates of digital adoption, and it has low rates of productivity. It's not always been the best at collaborating, particularly from company to company. But I think what we are seeing is firstly a rapid deployment of tech solutions, which have varying levels of success. Mm-hmm. A real desire to share the experiences of those tech solutions, just for the benefit of participants at the Innovation Centre. We're currently running a technology register, which I'll ask to be made available after this recording. And we have just under 90 tech solutions that have been adopted and are currently in either in testing or full implementation. So it's a really useful kind of cheat sheet to see what mm-hmm. could be available should you wish to solve a particular problem. What we are seeing is some real innovation around the deployment of very low tech solutions. We're talking about stickers and arrows. Mm-hmm. And signage and things that don't cost an awful lot but have a big impact on changing behaviour. But I would also like to point towards the leadership that's been shown within the industry. again, that connectedness and collaboration to respond to the crisis, with a single voice, or at very least with a leading voice. And longer term, my hope is that, driven by these business critical drivers, we're going to see an industry that responds very positively to this crisis, in a way that completely transforms the way in which it's structured and the way in which it operates. So I do think, whilst I would by no stretch position the construction industry at being at the leading edge of the response, in terms of technological adoption, what I would say is that, what I've seen as an industry that has taken the opportunity to look towards long-term, meaningful, impactful, and inclusive change.
It's a great aspiration. Fantastic. Peter, do you get any views?
In terms of the use of technology in the workplace?
Well, it's interesting how what Douglas was saying there was like it's a mix of high tech and low tech, and actually I suppose it's cherry picking the bits that are going to be right for you at you as in the construction industry at any point in their in their evolution, if you like, because I suppose the construction industry is a fairly low-tech business because it's about building things, physically doing it, but yeah, I think and my original question was about learning from other sectors as well. Is there anything else, are there any other parts of business sectors that we can learn from?
I think healthcare obviously has got certain elements within it that could be deployed, if you like. I'm trying to apply it to offices here, obviously, because we're talking about offices. But taking the idea of, we can talk about, again, when we get onto technology, that's where my head was going there, was that it's the kind of no-touch, if you like, movement kind of concepts. So effectively being able to actually come into a space without having to have lots of touches throughout the spaces, and allowing the technology, if you like, to try and to deal with that. Obviously, it's very difficult to minimise people, or you can tell them, you can say to them, don't touch, and you put the stickers up, don't touch, and stuff, but the technology will allow you the ability to listen to the stickers, if you like, putting it simply. Because if we're coming in via, the front door, the first opportunity for problems happens at the front door. So actually, we something, I know we're drifting maybe into some stuff in terms of technology, but we might see things like, apps being used from your phone, because your phone's an object that pretty much, everybody's got a phone now. I don't know actually anyone that's not got a phone, including my two kids. So. So the thing is actually you'll be downloading the phone, the access control systems will know you're coming, from a proximity perspective. It can open the door, it could welcome you, it could give you instruction at that point in time. Then when you go to the lifts, it will know which floor you're going to before you even get there. It'll pick you up using the Bluetooth technology, and it will interact with the turnstiles if we've got them. It'll interact with that lift, it'll take you to the space, it'll open the doors when you come into the space, and then you can go as far as the point of where, you actually have a map that actually takes you straight to the meeting room, which means, again, you're limiting your face-to-face contact with people that you don't really need to be making face-to-face contact with. So that technology absolutely all exists at the moment. And as you said, Douglas, I think our industry has not really grasped all of the kind of technologies that are available to us that are simple. And they are, to me, these are all simple technologies. The application is interesting. And we do have clients at the moment who are kind of pushing the boundaries, even in terms of developers, which are usually the last to grasp onto these new ideas. Usually the tenants are the first to drive innovation, but we've even got developers now who are looking at the kind of no-touch movement concept in buildings. And I know we're drifting into a bit of technology stuff as well here, but there's even the aspects of some of the smart building technologies that are deployed now, which were intended to analyse space and look at how space is used and how often it's used. I can see that being used. In fact, we did this for our commissioning for it. we can see that being used to see if spaces have been cleaned, if the cleaners have been in and they've cleaned the spaces. Because before this, we did a retest in the project we're finishing, and I said, when will the cleaners come in? Oh, about 7 o'clock. All right, bring up the system, we'll see if they cleaned the space properly. And we found they didn't. All they did was they made walkways. They didn't do the back, they didn't do between the desks. But we could see the technology could tell us, where that is. And we might see, robotic cleaning systems going in place in the future as well, to make sure things are done properly. It's tracked, traced, because there will be this instance of where people are now feeling very concerned about the cleanliness of their workspaces. So technology can play a part in that. It's not obviously the only solution, but it plays a part. And as I say, low tech and high tech.
Yep.
I think both have a part to play in this.
Okay.
If I may just...
On you go, Douglas, sorry.
I just wanted to say a couple of points in support of Peter. The first of which is that whole kind of concept of touchless from door to desk, I think, has really picked up a head of steam. And you're absolutely right in saying that the tech is available. What we are currently seeing is that the investment is going between kind of fixed wearables and then wearables and then the fixed systems which you're obviously referring to. My personal belief is that the push towards fixed systems makes an awful lot more sense for a range of reasons. I think as well, just to add to a previous point around the urgent or critical need for a platform to pull all these together in a way that makes sense of the data and doesn't rely upon a whole range of systems. The only one that I kind of wanted to raise as a potential red flag was around the kind of temperature monitoring of people coming into buildings, which I know has been at the forefront of a number of considerations. And what we're finding just now is that whilst some of these systems are being deployed, they have a couple of sizable drawbacks. First of which is very much around detection of asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic people, so it won't catch that.
Yeah.
There are concerns about the reliability more generally, and also around the collection of potentially clinical data, which takes you into a whole new world of you think GDPR is bad, you try and collect clinical data. So I think there's a piece around the design, the specification, the installation, implementation, bringing the value out of the data, and then thinking really carefully about what's going to happen with that data going forward. I think if you can get all that right, then the value add is it's untapped.
Yes. Yeah, I can totally understand that. I can also understand the concerns people would have of over sharing that data too. Jill's actually asked she's made a point actually, and before we kicked off this session, Douglas and I had a bit of a chat about the whole kind of empathetic innovation kind of concept, and Jill has suggested that we could learn from severely disabled people who use apps to negotiate their environment all the time. And she suggested Blackwood Cleverclog's system as an example of this, and I suppose that's going back to trying to understand from other sectors and other specialisms what they do well, and could we all benefit and learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we're taking ideas into education, which is similar to that. We're doing an ASN school where we are looking at the smart building technologies. So effectively what it does is it takes something like that bit of technology, but actually you actually have it all over the space, and actually you can also use it for the parent can actually see where their kid is, and it creates that sense of mindfulness as well in the space, and saying, oh, my kid's in the art space at the moment, or my kid's in, because it's ASN, and the other thing with technologies is, I mean, Gillian and I were at a presentation recently, it was the HoloLens technology as well. So that's something that it's really interesting as well, as a kind of holograms, and and limiting the human contact if you can is another option, quite a costly option if I'm being honest. But
so is that the Princess Leia one?
It's the Princess Leia one, that's it.
And does it work? to have
Yeah.
somebody there as a hologram or as a virtual, literally a 3D virtual person?
Don't know. The way that we were trying to apply the technology is actually more a play tool for the kids.
Ah, right, yeah.
So like the keyboards and things. So again, what you're trying to deal with is, I know we're drifting into the education stuff, but it's quite interesting idea. It was actually to limit physical contact with elements because it's a hologram. So you're not actually touching anything, you're touching air.
Mhm.
So actually what you've got is effectively even in the use of certain things. So this was like a keyboard, music keyboard. You play the music keyboard, but someone else could play the music keyboard, but they're not touching it, you know, so but using the holograms. So that kind of thing, you can think to yourself, I wonder what else, there must be a multitude of applications for that kind of technology to limit touching objects to do and interact. And again, like the screen, you know, this whole kind of idea of drawing on the screen. You can do that in the holographic environment with the camera. You can draw and it records it all, but you're not actually touching anything. You're actually just drawing on there. But again, it just limits the amount of things that we're touching.
That you're touching, yeah,
You're
yeah.
taking it really far now, but you know it's
Yeah.
there. The technology's there.
I think, Douglas, going back to your technology register that you have, I think that sounds a really interesting read. And if that could be available to people on the webinar, I think that would be really useful. And I suppose asking you to talk a bit more about empathetic innovation, and we were talking earlier about how different levels of ability or disability, as Jill highlighted, you know, technology has to be adaptable and I suppose bespokeable for people. So can you talk a wee bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So, and put simply, if you want to get it right, then you really need to involve your end users, and you need to understand their needs and expectations, and you need to understand their pains and gains. You know, they will provide insights and perspectives that you're unlikely to immediately consider yourself. And you know, we have a vast body of evidence demonstrating that their input will not only, you know, reduce the risk of developing you know, solutions that are exclusionary to certain groups, but they'll also, you know, kind of reduce the risk of you developing something that perhaps isn't even required because there's already a solution within the context of their world. A really good example of where this can go horribly wrong is actually in Apple's, you know, health tracking app, where they deployed it and seen, you know, with kind of heart rate monitors that we wear on our wrists, and they'd seen that women right across the world were reporting these, you know, kind of really strange signals that were coming through. And you know, what happened was they'd forgot to account for, you know, fertility cycles and ovulation cycles. So, you know, there's all these strange reports that deviate from the mean that they had in their design phase. And if they just included, you know, women through that design period, then, you know, they would have avoided that issue. So it was really embarrassing for Apple, and of course they had to quickly deploy a solution. And I think over and above that, you know, I think for me, when we're trying to design innovations that benefit, whether it's our end users or your tenants or, you know, those that occupy the buildings and offices that we have, engaging empowered employees are more likely to be motivated and productive, and more likely to invest in the tech if they're involved in designing the tech. And that's not just for tech, that's for any solution. And I think that the last point that I'd reflect on is that, you know, involving people in the development of solutions, you know, it has all these range of business benefits, and you can argue to a point there's, you know, a number of legal drivers in there. I think just the moral aspect of it being the right thing to do. You know, if it's for you, I want to work with you to create the solution. And I think that's a really important aspect, which is quite often overlooked when, you know, when we are deploying solutions to, you know, to particular challenges.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I suppose as somebody who tends to engage with our clients on the front end of projects, I and Peter know how important a good brief is, and actually taking people with you when you're designing something for them, whether it's an interior or a building, then you're much more likely to get it right, to avoid getting it wrong and the costly risks involved in that, and taking people with you all the time and listening, really listening is important. I can't believe that Apple Health app. That's a great story. How could you possibly miss out over 50% of the population? You know, that's nuts.
It's by no means a limited example.
Oh, really? Oh, no. Oh, dear, food for thought. So I think we're probably, Douglas, one thing I was thinking was I would suspect a lot of our members don't really know much about the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. So could you give us a bit of a kind of brief kind of précis of what you're about and how you can be accessible for us, for our members?
No, of course. So Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, we are a government-backed innovation centre. We're one of 7 in Scotland, all of which are based around kind of high value, high growth sectors. So we're construction, other innovation centres of note, in context of this conversation would be Census. We look at sensor and imaging systems. We have Data Lab, who are around data. We have the Digital Health Institute, who are around digital health. But we look after construction, and we're really here to support the industry to drive innovation, to drive value, to drive productivity. And the way that we do that is by working almost at the interface between the industry and our academic communities, to try and promote knowledge exchange, collaborative research and development, and of course innovation in its own right. We are currently running an series that we're calling ICON, or Innovation in Construction, and it has four strands. So we have a webinar series. Certainly welcome anyone who'd like to join us to come along to that. We have a knowledge register, knowledge and guidance, which is packed full of official guidance from government and trade professional bodies and the likes. We have a skills and training register, which is free to access and points towards thousands of online, I must say, wholly online at this stage, courses that in turn are free to access. So if you're looking for skilling, upskilling opportunities, it's there. And perhaps of most interest, we're running our Challenge Fund programme, in which we've made available pots of funding of up to £25,000 per project, where an industry partner can define a challenge, and we can work with them to bring academics in and to collaborate and resolve that challenge or work towards the resolution. We do also run an innovation champion network, which we're always keen to expand. So if you have a particular interest in the built environment, I should say we're not just construction, we are built environment, we are infrastructure, so it's construction in the widest sense. But we're always looking for specialists with expertise to come and work with us. And we are based out in Hamilton International Technology Park, where we have an absolutely massive digital prototyping factory, and we do a whole load of things that I can't pronounce or explain, but I'm assured they're wonderful. So as and when we do open up, we're always keen to have visitors, and you can carry out a virtual tour of our factory on the website should you wish to do so.
Great, fantastic. I know our Glasgow office certainly have visited your site at Hamilton, and we're really impressed with all the kind of prototyping and things. But actually, that's another thing, because we're about making things. It's seeing it, touching my gloves on. Yeah. So that's really interesting, particularly around. Yeah. So perhaps. I wonder if there's any way, I'll speak to BCO, but it would be good if we could maybe get some links to your various parts in your website that we could actually circulate out to everybody who joined in today. I've got one more observation actually that Hazel Pearson, who's on the BCO committee, has asked, and it's maybe one for Peter. She said, I wonder whether the hologram would help with bringing energy to the 2D virtual world. And she's saying she finds a whole different level of enthusiasm is required in a 2D virtual world, as if it's harder to read body language. People have their TV face on. I wish I could find my TV face personally. And there's a lot less movement to bring the energy. You can see why TV and stage actors, they need to overact, when you're on this virtual platform. and use their hands like I do.
Use
Anyway.
their hands all the time. Same
Yeah.
here. I usually do it as well when I'm
Yeah.
presenting. So yeah, that's one of the big points, if you like, the HoloLens as a technology. Is that you can, there's a great link, in fact, Gillian, I'll send you a link to the HoloLens that you can circulate as well to the members.
Okay.
And it is really, really kind of cool, if you like. But the idea is that you can have a presenter in a remote location, which has a camera on it. The camera actually effectively scans your body, if you like, the presenter's body, and actually can place it in that other environment. Using the HoloLens, so you actually have a full, if you like, the full figure of the person actually in the environment that you're experiencing through the holographic lens technology. So yes, you can, and even if you're doing your buildings as well, if you're presenting buildings and things, the hologram's even better than the Revit model, because you can actually scan around. It can blow out. It is really, really interesting. As I say, we were applying that technology. After we spoke to, when I seen obviously James at Microsoft presenting, I was on to him pretty quickly because I could see lots of applications for various different sectors.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that we're trying to look at it in is the education sector, and actually trying to even get, if you like, the teacher, if the teacher needs to communicate with their pupils in the home, is that going to be a less expensive solution, giving them the HoloLens based upon where we are at the moment and getting education going again? Those kind of things. So yes, it is better to have the physical 3D representation as opposed to this 2D screen in terms of communication. 100%.
Yeah. So I think we're probably pretty much done, unless you guys have got anything else to say. I was going to ask you though, where would you like the construction industry to be in 3 years in terms of its adoption of technology, its the cognizance of the fact that we have, as you said, Peter, it's likely infection control is going to be something that we're going to have to build into our design processes now. Could you summarize where you'd like the construction industry to be in 3 years? Who wants to go first? Sorry, it's a bit left field.
I'll dive in. So, for me, I think we can make the presumption that the adoption of tech, the saturation of tech solutions, we will realise that, certainly within the next 3 to 5 years. I think what I'd like to see is some maturity around that happens. I think the platform approach is going to be key to that. So I'd like us to kind of supercharge our effort, or turbocharge, to borrow the name of the title of the webinar today, our efforts towards the standardization and pushing towards platform, pushing towards advanced industrialization of our methods. And I think it goes beyond the smart buildings. It goes beyond digital workflows, and actually looking at an industry which is increasingly embracing manufacturing techniques. Is increasingly pushing towards digital as a means, both to drive and inform lower carbon construction processes, both in new build but also in retrofit. I think it's an industry. There's a huge opportunity to digitize and maximize the value that comes out of the procurement and the supply chain space. Which I think is a space where we can create huge value, and I hope, you asked me what's it look like in 3 years. I hope that those savings associated with digitization aren't necessarily impacting the bottom line of that supply chain, but are adding value right across the piece to ensure that we do have resilience, and we can have an industry that's both more productive and more profitable.
Right, okay, that's great.
Yeah,
fantastic. Peter?
In 3 years' time, you know how slow our industry is at moving.
30? No, 3 years time.
I mean, in terms of where I would like it to be, is maybe different from where it probably will get to. I mean, from where I would like it to be is we are obviously very keen on low energy design, passive design in terms of our buildings. That leads us to look at more natural concepts in terms of delivering those solutions. The other big element for me in the future is materiality of construction. And we've got to really consider how we're building our buildings going forward.
Yeah.
There's a big driving towards embodied carbon content, which again we're kind of heavily involved in at the moment in a number of projects and assessing that, which is we see it again. This pandemic has been a catalyst for thinking in terms of all things related to our world. You know, in terms of it's led to more thinking about sustainability in its true sense, not in its just saying the word. It's about actually embracing it and looking after our environment, because I think that's been a big wake up call. So we've seen certainly an influx in terms of clients as well, embracing that, and in terms of tenants especially, and also developers. So we see that future world, there'll be a short, medium, and long term, but the future world has got to be looking at limiting our material content in buildings, maximising natural resources, and actually using the best benefits of our natural resources. Digital technology is something that will be used to help people, but not as a first approach. The first approach should be to limit and create buildings without bits of equipment and things. I know that seems strange coming from a building service engineer, but again, we need to limit. If we can limit equipment, we've done a good job, and that limits cost as well. But to allow us to do these things, this is the big thing, right? To allow us to do all this, we need to think about what our external environment is, so that when our building designs can connect with that external environment in a better way. So the town's full of, cars, I keep saying it, cars and buses and everything. These are the kind of things that we need to try and, eliminate from our cities. Yeah. And that way we can our buildings can actually expand into these spaces, and we can create arcades, we can create connected spaces. That would be my vision, if you like, of the future. 3 years isn't enough for that, I don't think. That's the way that I would like to see it, is that we create these spaces like that.
And in many ways, what you've described is something that they did, because they did, I don't know, 50 years ago, before we air conditioned everything.
I know.
And if you think about, early 20th century architecture, it was all about creating these arcades, connected spaces that allowed airflow but provided protection from the environment. And I suppose we're lucky in a way that we live in quite a temperate climate, albeit it's the west of Scotland, it rains a lot, but it's not like we are in the south of Spain or in Africa, where the temperatures are really, really challenging. So yes, I suppose the BCO need to think about that too, and how we change our aspirations in terms of environmental performance in buildings. One for Neil Pinnell, I think. But
as we like to say, it's designing for performance, right? Not for compliance.
Yeah.
So design for what the building's doing, not for what some book says that it should do.
Yes, because ultimately it's designed for a use, and that use is informed by the brief, as we've talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay, well, listen, I think we've probably virtually run out of time, but I just wanted to thank you both very much. It's been a really good conversation, and actually, personally, we should do it again over a glass of wine, maybe 2 meters apart, but at some point it would be good. And thanks so much to everyone else. Just a quick call out in case there's any other questions. I've not had any more over the webinar, so no, nothing else coming through. So thanks again, and I hope everybody found that interesting and enjoyable, and I wish everybody a good weekend. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Gillian. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.